The brown liquid dripped slowly from her hair, splashing onto the white marble floor like it belonged there. For a moment there was silence, then laughter, loud, cruel, echoing laughter. It bounced off the glass walls, sharp like knives. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her blouse clung to her skin, soaked in soda, and her heels felt like they were glued to the floor. "Clean it up," someone said. The voice was sharp, cold. "That's what you people do, right?" She looked up. The words had come from the marketing director, perfect blonde hair, red lips, manicured nails pointing at the puddle on the ground like it was a crime scene. The others stood around watching, some with phones out, some trying not to laugh, others just staring like they were watching a movie they didn't want to be part of, but couldn't turn away from. I'm not a janitor," she said, her voice so low it almost got lost in the hum of the air conditioning. The woman smirked. Could have fooled me, and just like that, it all collapsed. 23 years. That's how long she had given to this place. 23 years of early mornings and late nights, of staying quiet when she was ignored in meetings, of swallowing back tears when someone made a comment that cut too deep, of always having to work twice as hard to get half as far. She'd done everything right, and this is what it came to, upstairs. She could see people watching from the mezzanine. Some looked shocked, some amused. No one moved. No one said a word. The elevator behind her dinged softly, its doors sliding open. But she didn't turn around. She stayed still, trying to breathe, trying to hold the pieces of herself together before they fell to the floor with the rest of her dignity. Just 3 hours earlier, she had walked into the building with a different feeling. She had smiled at the receptionist. She had clutched her leather portfolio tight to her chest, knowing that today was important, maybe the most important day in her career. She had spent the last month preparing for this pitch, every slide perfected, every number double-checked. She hadn't just practiced the presentation. She'd lived it, breathed it, dreamed it out. She was ready to prove to the entire executive board that she deserved her place at that table, ready to win the biggest account in the company's history. It wasn't just a deal, it was her chance to finally be seen. "Morning," she'd said, smiling at a colleague who passed by. He gave her a quiet nod, not really stopping. People rarely stopped for her, but she'd gotten used to that. She told herself it didn't matter, as long as the work spoke louder than the whispers. But even then, the whispers followed her. Down the hallway, past the glass offices, past the break room, where a group stood sipping coffee and watching her walk by. One of them, yes, the same woman who would later throw the drink, muttered something just loud enough, walking like she owns the place. "She's not even that good. Diversity hire." She heard it, all of it. She always did. But she never reacted. She couldn't afford to. Not here, not after everything she had built. She kept her head up and walked straight into the conference room. And now, here she was, standing in the lobby with soda dripping down her face, the smell of sugar and shame filling her nose. Her fingers were clenched so tightly around her folder that the edges were digging into her palm. Still, she didn't let go. It was the only thing holding her up. That and whatever tiny scrap of pride she had left. One of the younger interns hurried over with paper towels, eyes wide with worry, but was stopped by a sharp look from a manager. No one else moved. Then the woman with the drink leaned in again. "Maybe next time. Think twice before pretending to be one of us." That was it. Something inside her snapped, not loudly, but quietly, like a string pulled too tight for too long. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just took a deep breath, stood a little taller, and turned to walk away. They didn't stop her. They thought they had broken her, but they had no idea what was coming next. She walked out of the building like a ghost, silent, cold, invisible. The warm sunlight outside didn't reach her skin. Her heels clicked against the pavement, steady and proud, but inside her heart was unraveling. She didn't cry. Not yet. Not while they might still be watching. Not while the sting of soda still lingered on her scalp, and the weight of 23 years pressed down on her chest like a stone. But as soon as she turned the corner and reached the parking garage, where no one could see her, she leaned against the concrete wall, closed her eyes, and finally let out a shaky breath. 20-3 years. That's how long she'd given them. Not just the company, but the system. The game, the constant, exhausting climb. She hadn't been handed anything. Not a single shortcut. Not a single free pass. She remembered being 19, holding her baby on one hip while filling out college applications with the other hand. Her husband had just been deployed. There were bills on the table and barely enough food in the fridge. Some days she couldn't even afford the bus fare to get to class, but she still went. Every night, every weekend. She'd worked 3 jobs. To keep the lights on waitressing during the day, cleaning offices at night, and folding laundry in between. She hadn't slept. But she never stopped, because she believed in something. In herself. In a future she couldn't yet see but refused to stop chasing. That future was supposed to be now. She had finally made it to the top senior project manager, the only Black woman in leadership, one of the sharpest minds in the company. Everyone said so. Even the clients asked for her by name, but respect, real respect, that never came. It was always subtle. Quiet glances passed between colleagues during meetings. Getting talked over when she spoke. Getting left off the email. Chain, then blamed for being out of the loop. Her ideas were packaged and credited to someone else. The lunch invites that never came. The awkward silences when she entered a room. Sometimes it wasn't even what they said, but how they said it. Like when the CEO called her articulate in a meeting, as if he was surprised she could speak in full sentences. Or when they introduced her to a client and said, "She's our diversity rock star," instead of just, "She's brilliant." She smiled through all of it, told herself she was just being sensitive, that she had to work twice as hard to go half as far, and she was willing to do the work, carry the weight, earn their respect. But that's the thing no one talks about, how tiring it is to always have to earn what others are simply given. And even now, after 2 decades of loyalty, of never raising her voice, never making trouble, never letting them see how much it all hurt. This is how they chose to repay her. With a drink to the face, with laughter. With you people. Her hands were still shaking as she opened the door to her car. She sat inside, gripping the wheel, staring at her own reflection in the rear view. Mirror. Hair soaked, makeup ruined. Eyes red, but not from tears, from fire. From something ancient and powerful rising inside her that she'd kept buried for too long. She wasn't angry because of the drink. She wasn't even angry because of the words. She was angry because, deep down, she had let it happen. She had silenced herself for years in the name of professionalism, bit her tongue in the name of peace, and for what? So she could be told she didn't belong? So she could be paraded around as the token face of diversity while being mocked behind closed doors? So they could remind her at any moment that she was disposable? Her mind raced. The presentation, the pitch, the hours she'd poured into building that strategy. It was her best work. She knew it. And they dismissed it without even looking at the numbers because it came from her. Not because it wasn't good, but because it was too good. Because it scared them. She thought of all the time she'd been told she was too confident, too ambitious, too intense. She wasn't too anything. She was exactly enough. She just never stopped to realize it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter. "Hey Mom, did you nail the pitch?" But tears finally came, not out of sadness, but something else. A grief for the years she'd spent trying to fit into a world that was never built for her. A world that only welcomed her so long as she stayed silent, grateful, and invisible. But something had changed. The silence they expected from her, it was gone. She looked at the text again, wiped her face, and typed back, "No, baby. I didn't, but something better just started." She didn't know exactly what that better would look like yet, but she could feel it. Something had been set free inside her. Something unstoppable. They thought they broke her, but they didn't know they just lit a fire. And this time, she wasn't coming back to knock on their door for a seat at their table. She was going to build a new one, and it was going to shake everything they thought they knew about who belonged at the top. She didn't go home right away. Instead, she parked a few blocks away in an empty lot and sat in silence. The world outside kept moving. Cars passed. People walked by. Someone laughed in the distance, but inside the car, everything had gone still. She looked down at her hands. They were steady now. No more shaking. Just quiet resolve. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel afraid of speaking up. Not nervous, not cautious, not careful, just done. Done shrinking. Done proving. Done swallowing poison just to keep her seat at a table that never really welcomed her. She had spent decades walking on eggshells, smiling through microaggressions, nodding at backhanded compliments, working overtime and thanking them for the opportunity, wearing armor every day to survive rooms where her skin made her the unspoken outsider. But now the armor was off, and what was underneath wasn't broken, it was dangerous. It was power wrapped in grace, fire wrapped in silence. And it was done hiding. She turned the key in the ignition and headed back. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like an out-of-body experience. She wasn't the same woman who had stood here this morning, hopeful and wide-eyed, clinging to the dream that maybe, just maybe today, they'd finally see her worth. No. That woman had been left in the lobby, drenched in soda and humiliation. The doors slid open and everything stopped. Conversations paused mid-sentence, phones lowered. Eyes turned. There she was, hair still wet, blouse still stained, but standing tall. She walked past them without flinching. The same floor where she'd once been invisible now couldn't look. Away, she didn't go to her office. She didn't check her calendar. She walked straight to the conference room, the one where they laughed, where they dismissed her, where they humiliated her and expected her to disappear. The door was still, slightly open. Inside, the leadership team was talking, pretending nothing had happened, until they saw her. The room fell silent. Miss Johnson, the CEO started, his voice thin and uncertain. Perhaps it's best we sit down and no. Just that. One word, calm, clear. Unapologetic. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. There was nowhere to run now. No hiding behind titles or fake smiles. No more office culture excuses. Just her and them. She looked at each of them, one by one, not with anger, but clarity. I spent 23 years in this company, she began, her voice steady. I built campaigns that won awards. I pulled teams out of crises. I mentored junior staff, brought in new clients, and never once asked for more than what I deserved. No one interrupted. No one dared. I sat quietly through meetings where I wasn't heard. I watched people get promoted over me because they played golf with the boss. I laughed at your jokes when they cut deep. I answered every 10 p.m. email without complaint. I made you money. A lot of it. And in return, she paused. In return, I got a drink to the face. And all of you watched. Her eyes locked with the marketing director, the woman who'd done it. She didn't flinch, and not one of you said a word. The air grew heavy. Someone shifted uncomfortably in their chair. Another stared at the table. But that's okay, she said, softening. Because today you did something I should have done for myself a long time ago. You reminded me that no matter how good I am, how hard I work, how much I give, you were never going to let me fully belong here. She placed her presentation, folder gently on the table, so I won't ask anymore. She looked directly at the CEO. I resign? Effective immediately. There was a beat of stunned silence. You don't need to do this, he stammered. Let's be reasonable. Emotions are high, she smiled, not kindly. I'm not emotional. I'm clear. Miss Johnson, be sensible. My name, she said, cutting him off, is not Miss Johnson. It's the woman who held this place together while you all underestimated her. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. That presentation. You laughed at? The one you said was off-brand? She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive, placing it gently on the table. You'll be hearing about it again, just not from me. With that, she walked out, the room behind. Her remained frozen. No one followed Dot in the elevator. As the doors closed, she exhaled deeply. She had no plan, no backup job, no investors, no office. But what she did have for the first time in a very long time was freedom, not just from the company, but from the lie that she had to shrink herself to survive. The mask was gone. The silence was gone. And what remained was something she hadn't felt in years. Power. And this time, she wasn't going to give it away. She drove without knowing where she was going. City blocks blurred past her window as if the world was spinning. Faster than it should. But inside her car, everything was still. She didn't play music. She didn't make a call. She just gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. She had walked away. No, not just walked, claimed her worth, in a room that spent years trying to erase it. And yet, as the adrenaline faded, a creeping doubt slid. And what now? She had no job, no office, no security. She pulled into a quiet park on the edge of downtown. Trees lined the edge of a small walking trail. She parked under the shade of an old oak, took off her heels, and leaned her head back against the seat. That's when her phone buzzed. One notification. Then 10. Then 30. A text from her daughter came first. Mom, are you okay? I saw the video. It's everywhere. Video? Her heart stopped. Fingers shaking, she unlocked her phone and opened the first link she saw. A shaky cell phone recording posted less than 2 hours ago. Someone from the mezzanine had captured it the entire moment. The drink, the insult, the laughter, her silence. And now the whole world could see it too. In just 90 seconds. Her entire career, her entire silence had gone public. The views were climbing by the second. 125,000. 380,000. Over 500,000 before she even finished watching. The comments were pouring in. Disgusting behavior. That company needs to be held accountable. She handled that with more grace than I ever could. Who is this woman? I want to hire her right now. This is why women of color are tired. Don't cry, sis. Build. The video had caught fire, and with it, the lie that silence keeps you safe burned to the ground. She closed her eyes and let out a long breath. She hadn't planned on being a symbol. She didn't want to be the woman in the viral video. But maybe this wasn't about her anymore. Maybe this was about something bigger. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a name that made her. Hand paused before answering. She took a moment, fixed her posture, then tapped accept. Hey, came the voice on the other end. Calm, deep, familiar. How did it go? She tried to answer, but her throat closed up. All the strength she had mustered in that boardroom now felt like it was slipping away. The words came out hoarse. They humiliated me, she whispered. There was silence on the line. The kind that didn't feel empty but full of anger, full of care, full of quiet fury. Where are you? He asked. She gave him the name of the park. I'm on my way. No questions. No speeches. Just that simple promise. 10 minutes later, a black car pulled into the lot. He stepped out. No entourage. No drama. Just the quiet confidence of a man who didn't need to prove who he was. When he opened the door, she looked up and finally let the tears fall. He didn't say anything. Just opened his arms. She folded into his chest, the ache in her chest finally finding somewhere to rest. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know we agreed to keep work and personal life separate. I didn't want them to judge me for being with you. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. Don't you dare apologize for what they did. She nodded, still trembling. Show me the video. They sat in the car and watched it together. She felt his jaw tense, his breathing change, his silence deepen. How long has this been happening? He asked Dot. She didn't have to think. Too long. He nodded once, then reached for his phone. What are you doing? She asked. Starting something. He replied. He made 3 calls. The first was to his head of security. Pull every public record on that company. Every exec who was in the room. I want to know what they had for breakfast and what skeletons they've buried. The second was to his attorney. I want to know if any of my companies are financially connected to them. If we are, we won't be for long. The third was to a name she didn't recognize. You owe me a favor, he said calmly. I'm calling it in. She watched him not as her husband, but as the man she'd once seen speak on a stage about justice, equity, and power. The man who had built his empire from nothing, who never raised his voice, but whose name made industries pay attention. I didn't want to be rescued, she said quietly. He looked at her. This isn't a rescue, he said. This is a reckoning. They drove in silence for a moment before he added, But I won't move unless you say the word. This is your story, you lead it. I'll just make sure the path stays clear. She stared out the window. Her reflection met her gaze in the glass. Not weak, not broken. Just done being afraid Dot, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she needed to be invited into anything. She was ready to build her own. She turned back to him. I want them to know who I really am. Not just your wife. Not just the woman they humiliated, but the one they underestimated. A slow smile spread across his face. I was hoping you'd say that. She stood in front of her closet the next morning, staring at a sea of professional suits. Gray, navy, cream. All picked carefully over the years to be appropriate. Neutral, unthreatening. But today wasn't about being safe. Today was about being seen. She reached for a black power suit that she'd only worn once before. Structured shoulders, clean lines. A quiet storm stitched into silk. She tied her hair up with intention, touched up her makeup like war paint, and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't see the woman from yesterday. The one who had stood dripping with soda and shame while others laughed. She saw someone new. Not born overnight, but finally revealed. By 9 a.m. She stepped through the same glass doors of the office she had walked out of just 24 hours earlier. But this time, her presence felt like thunder. The room didn't go silent, it froze. People looked up from their desks. Some gasped. Some whispered. Everyone stared. The receptionist, the same one who avoided her eyes yesterday, opened her mouth, then quickly shut it. Good morning, she said calmly, walking across the same marble floor where her dignity had once been wiped away. Her heels clicked like a countdown. By the time she reached the elevator, the whispers had become a wave. That's her. She's the one from the video. She's married to Wait, seriously? She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She pressed the button for the executive floor and waited. The elevator doors opened to familiar surroundings, but nothing felt the same. There was no bustling energy. No laughter, just tension. And fear. Word had spread overnight. Not just about the video. But about who she really was. The wife of the man who now held this company's future in his hands. The CEO was already waiting near the boardroom, his expression forced into something resembling a welcome. Maya, he said, voice cracking slightly. We didn't expect. I'm not here for you, she said. Calm, cold, direct. He blinked. If we could talk, maybe. No, she said, cutting him off. You had a chance to talk. You chose silence. She walked past him. It was Jennifer, the same woman who had thrown the drink, who spoke next. She was near the coffee station, her hands trembling slightly as she held her mug. You're threatening us, she said, trying to sound bold, but her voice was thinner than paper. I'm not threatening anyone, Maya said, turning to face her. I'm simply educating you. She took 3 steps forward and stood exactly where she had been humiliated the day before. The same spot where her identity had been reduced to a punchline. "You see," she began, her voice steady and slow, "when you laughed at me, when you mocked my work, questioned my qualifications, and said, 'You people, you didn't just insult me.'" She paused. "You exposed yourselves." She pulled out her phone and held it up. The world saw it. 5 million views and counting. Morning shows, news outlets, blogs. I've been contacted by companies asking if I'd like to lead their teams. People who see me, who value what I bring to the table. She walked to the middle of the floor, her confidence radiating like heat. "You didn't break me yesterday. You revealed me." Someone behind her cleared their throat. A senior executive, someone who had laughed the day before. "Let's not blow this out of proportion," he said weakly. She turned to him. "Out of proportion?" She repeated. "You watched a woman get verbally attacked and physically humiliated, and your response was to laugh." She pulled something from her bag. A business card, sleek, elegant, crisp lettering. "Maya Johnson Webb," she read aloud. "Founder and CEO, Elevation Marketing Group." She handed it to him without a word. "I'm your competition now." Gasps rippled across the floor. "You built this company on exclusion, on pretending to be progressive while quietly punishing anyone who didn't fit your mold. But while you were busy keeping people out, I was learning how to build something better." She turned her gaze back to the CEO. "You called me a diversity hire, said I forgot my place." She smiled. "This is my place now." Jennifer tried to speak, but Maya cut her off with a glance. "And that pitch you all mocked?" Maya continued, eyes locked on the CEO. "The one you said would never work?" She held up another folder. "Morrison Industries signed with me this morning. $50 million. Silence. Dead. Breathless. Heavy. And 3 of your other clients reached out last night. They're tired of your performative campaigns and your boardroom bias. Turns out, people want to work with those who reflect their values." She stepped back toward the elevator. "No need to worry," she said, her voice light now. "I'm not here to ruin you." She turned around one last time. "I'm here to replace you." Then, before anyone could respond, she stepped inside the elevator and let the doors close behind her as she descended. She felt lighter than she had in years. Not because revenge had been served, but because she finally saw herself clearly and knew the world was beginning to see her too. She didn't celebrate that night. There was no party, no champagne, no grand declaration. She just sat on her living room floor, barefoot in her favorite hoodie, surrounded by notepads and open laptops. Her daughter brought her a cup of tea and kissed the top of her head without saying a word. Something had shifted. Something deeper than winning a deal or clapping back at cool coworkers. She wasn't chasing a title anymore, or a paycheck, or their approval. Now she was building something of her own, on her own terms. And it had to be done right. The next few weeks were a blur of action. She barely slept. She made calls, sent emails, sketched out ideas on napkins and sticky notes. Her husband offered resources, but never overstepped. She was clear with him from the beginning. "This is mine. I need to build it with my own hands." And he understood. Completely. They worked side by side or in the dining room turned office, him in the den. 2 powerhouses with different missions but shared purpose. Elevation Marketing Group was born not in a skyscraper or a startup incubator, but in the quiet of that living room. And word spread fast. The Morrison deal made headlines. Diversity hire to industry leader. One headline read. But she hated that phrase. She wasn't a diversity hire. She was a damn visionary. And now everyone was beginning to realize it. But more than the fame or the viral moment, what moved her the most were the emails. They poured in, dozens, then hundreds. Women from small towns, young professionals in big cities, men who kept silent in boardrooms, people from every corner of the world, every background, saying the same thing. Your story is my story. I've been humiliated too, but I didn't have the words. You made me believe I could build something. She printed every one and pinned them to a corkboard above her desk. A reminder of why she was doing this. Her first hires weren't from big-name agencies. They were people like her, undervalued, overlooked, but brilliant. People who were told they were too much or not enough. People who had scars, but still showed up every day with fire in their eyes. Her second hire was her daughter, Dot, not just as an intern, but as an equal. A young Black woman who was going to learn how to lead from someone who'd paid the price for her seat. Together, they worked late into the night, building campaigns rooted in real stories. Marketing that didn't just sell products, but moved people. That celebrated culture instead of exploiting it. That didn't flatten identities into slogans, but told full human truths. Clients noticed Dot and they came, fast. Within 2 months, Elevation had taken on 5 major accounts, 3 of them pulled directly from her former company, but she didn't reach out to them. They came to her. Dot. Why? Because they wanted authenticity. Because she didn't just understand underserved markets, she was the market for years. She didn't talk about diversity to check a box, she built it into the foundation of her company. She hired single moms, career switchers, veterans, immigrants. She built a workspace with childcare support, mental health resources, and flexible schedules not because it was trendy, but because it was necessary. Dot, and people didn't just want to work with her. They wanted to belong to what she was creating. Still, she wasn't interested in revenge. The fall of her old company meant nothing to her now. She didn't check the headlines. She didn't follow their struggles, but word got back to her anyway. Layoffs, client losses, silent boardrooms, people jumping ship. Dot, they were becoming a cautionary tale. Not because of her, but because of themselves. She wasn't the villain. She was the mirror, and they had finally seen their reflection. 6 months after her resignation, Elevation Marketing Group opened its first physical office. A glass building downtown, 3 full floors. Her name on the directory, her team buzzing with energy. Her daughter, now managing junior creatives, called it a vibe. On the wall behind the reception desk hung a framed photo of Maya standing. In front of the building's entrance, hand on her hip, smile soft but fierce. Beneath the photo, etched in gold, "We don't ask for seats. We build the table." She never forgot what it took to get there. The sleepless nights, the days she doubted herself, the sting of that drink, the sound of that laughter. But she also remembered the moment she stood up. The moment she said, "I quit," not as a sign of giving up, but as the beginning of taking back. Her empire wasn't built from revenge. It was built from vision, from pain. Yes, but also from clarity, from refusing to disappear. Dot, from reclaiming her name, her story, her future. And now she was just getting started. The sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office. Dot, it was early before the calls, before the meetings, before the world started asking things of her. These quiet mornings had become her favorite part of the day. Just her. A cup of tea and the view from the 18th floor. Dot, from up here, she could see everything. The street where she once parked her car with tear-stained cheeks. The corner cafe where she'd taken her first client meeting for Elevation Marketing. And if she squinted hard enough, the top of the building where she had once been humiliated and then reborn. Her fingers lightly traced the rim of her mug. It was a gift from her daughter, painted with bold letters. "They tried to bury you, but they didn't know you were a seed." She smiled. That quote used to make her cry. Now, it made her proud. There was a knock at the door. Her assistant poked her head in, beaming. "The reporter is here." Maya stood, smoothing her dress and slipping on her heels. They didn't make her feel powerful anymore. She was powerful with or without them. Dot, as she walked into the conference room, the young woman waiting by the table stood up quickly. She had a tablet in one hand, a pen in the other, and eyes full of admiration. "Thank you for taking the time, Ms. Johnson-Webb," she said. "I've followed your story since last year. It meant something to me." Maya nodded kindly. "That's why I said yes." The recorder clicked on Dot. The reporter started with the usual questions about growth, clients, business strategy. Maya answered professionally, but her eyes kept drifting to the reporter's hands, how tightly she gripped the pen. The nervous energy buzzing under her calm voice. Dot. Then came the final question. Do you ever regret what happened that day? Do you ever wonder if it had been better to stay quiet? Maya leaned back in her chair. She looked out the window again. Did she regret it? The years she spent being small just to feel safe. The years of second-guessing herself. The quiet moments where she didn't speak up because she was afraid it would cost her everything. Yes, she regretted those things, but not what happened that day. Not the moment her silence cracked wide open. Not the truth that spilled out with it. Not the fire it ignited. No, she said simply. I don't regret a thing. She turned her gaze back to the reporter. I used to think I had to survive. Quietly, that if I just kept my head down, worked hard enough, they'd eventually let me in. But the truth is, no one was ever going to give me a seat. Because they were afraid of what would happen if I sat down and spoke. She paused. But now I own the table. The reporter blinked, visibly moved. If you could speak to the woman you were before that day, the woman who stood frozen in that lobby, what would you say to her? Maya's voice grew softer. I'd tell her she was never wrong to believe in herself. I'd tell her she wasn't crazy for thinking the room felt colder when she walked in, that it wasn't her imagination, that she wasn't too sensitive, she was too powerful, and they knew it. She smiled gently, and I'd tell her, it's okay to let go of places that were never built to hold your light. The reporter looked down for a moment, swallowing hard. Her own emotions stirred. You know, she said, I watched that video of you maybe 20 times. Not just because of what happened, but because of what came after. You reminded me that silence isn't strength, that sometimes dignity looks like walking away. Maya nodded. Sometimes the real power is knowing when to stop proving and start creating. The interview wrapped. The reporter gathered her things and thanked her again. Maya walked her to the elevator. As the doors began to close, the reporter asked almost shyly, Can I ask one last thing? Of course. What would you say to someone watching your story now, someone who's been pushed down, made to feel small, who's not sure they'll ever rise again? Maya didn't hesitate. I'd say, your worth doesn't depend on their comfort. It doesn't live in their approval or their titles or their rooms. It lives in you. And the moment you stop asking for permission to be seen, that's the moment everything starts to change. She leaned forward slightly. They may try to reduce you, but you are not what they call you. You are what you build. What you choose. What you rise from. The elevator doors closed. And just like that, the reporter was gone. Maya turned back toward her office, walking with quiet strength. Outside, the city buzzed with life. People rushing to work, chasing goals, answering emails, showing up for dreams they hoped someone would notice. But Maya? She no longer needed to be noticed. She was the notice. That afternoon, she sat with her daughter in a meeting room named after her late husband. On the walls were posters from Elevation's latest campaign, a community investment project aimed at helping underrepresented entrepreneurs get their first clients. Their first office, their first yes. One of the posters read, We don't rise in spite of who we are. We rise because of it. Later that day, after everyone had gone home, she stood by the window again. The city looked different now, not because it had changed, but because she had. And as the lights blinked on in buildings across the skyline, Maya Johnson-Webb finally understood. They thought they were putting her in her place that day, but all they did was set her free.